Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 22nd of January, comes to you from London. And as always, we start by looking at the dollar index. We see markets down today, so we see quite a lot of red there on the screen. Remembering this data is all coming from Thomson Reuters icon on this screen, or if you're a private user, Metastock Zenith. These are my long-term chart, my weekly, my 1% point figure, my medium term, my daily, my half percent point figure, and my 60-minute chart. So the dollar is bullish above all three time frames, so it's still bullish. We do have some downside targets, but we're seeing that recovery here showing up in the point and figure chart and new upside targets activated. So strong dollar is still the theme. Looking at the euro, euro is weaker against the dollar, bearish on all three time frames. New downside target of 110 activated, so don't be surprised to see the euro weakening against the dollar, and another downside target activated here to 95 cents to the dollar, so a euro worth 95 cents basically. And we do have this really big downside target, so a collapse in the euro is still long term a possibility. That's what the chart says. And we look at the yen, the dollar strengthening here as well, not quite as bullish on the medium and long term charts, but the short term still holding its own. Running out of some short term targets, so we may just see that the dollar has gone as far as it can against the yen for the moment. Sterling, we're seeing just weakening against the dollar. We're just back below the cloud now. We're bearish in all three time frames. Even though we are holding this 129 level, it's not enough momentum to keep the sterling trend running. Downside targets here as well hanging over as big downside targets. So the market's still fearful regarding Brexit, and that's showing up in the charts. And we look at sterling against the euro, we see actually sterling just looking a little bit stronger of late, but still a pretty mixed picture there as well. Against the Swiss franc, bearish on the medium and long term charts, and against the Aussie dollar, we have been stronger in the short term there. Looking at Bitcoin, really picture little changed, just bearish on all three time frames. New downside target of $3,400. So we are just sitting in the doldrums after this catastrophic fall, and it'll take quite a while for recovery. Looking at the US markets were closed yesterday for Martin Luther King Day, so not much to comment on there. Looking at the futures, today we're down 0.63% on the S&P future. On the Nasdaq, we're down 0.75%. So futures are pricing in falls today at the open. UK market, the FTSE 100 down 0.16%. The mid caps down are up very slightly. And they're just holding their bull trend, but no clear upside targets for this recovery to continue. Looking at the DAX, we're lower this morning. We are bullish on the short-term chart. The recovery continues on the short term. We've got an upside target of 3% on the DAX, but medium and long term we're still bearish. CAC Quarant is off 0.22% this morning. Japan was off nearly 2/3%. The Hang Seng down 0.7%, and our main concern over the past year has been China. China down 1.2%. So we are seeing further falls there. These downside targets are the big concern on Chinese market. If we look at the 1% chart, we've got downside targets as 10%, 23%, 37%, 44%. Lots of downside targets. That's a big concern when you have multiple targets like that. And on the half percent chart, we've got 8%, 7%, 5%, 24%. Market and all activated, even that one just activated with these lows. Markets are still very fearful for Chinese stocks. Looking at the Sensex, we are down 0.4% overnight. We're bullish on the short-term charts, and the medium-term charts still wandering into bullish territory with good upside targets. Probably one of the better-looking markets. And the Sensex, the Australian market, just holding on as well, although it was down 0.5%. Brent crude sitting at $62.13 this morning, just pulling back, so we are seeing a bit of a change there. WTI sitting at down 0.75%. US nat gas was down a massive 5%. We're in bearish territory on that short term, having struggled to hold this sort of mid 350s level, and we're back into the 320s now. So $3.28 this morning. Taking a look at gold, gold actually up this morning 0.4%, but not enough to reverse the bearish short-term trend. Silver in a short-term downtrend as well. US 10-year yields sitting steady at $2.77%. So quite key there. 2.75% we're seeing on the yield. The German bond market, we've seen a resurgence in the last few months and little change there. Taking U.S. markets were closed, of course, so for Martin Luther King Day. Taking a look at the stocks individually, this data all coming from Yahoo Finance. So it's my weekly chart, my 1% chart, my daily chart, my 0.5%. Here I've got an on-balance volume chart. Just allows me to, and on the daily that allows me to see just whether there are any moves are volume driven, and then a relative to the Dow Jones Index, again all from Yahoo. No 60-minute data here because it's a end of day feed, although we do the prices do update live from the Yahoo feed, but intraday charts we lose that view, but it's still a very, very good way of looking at stocks. We see the sea of red in Asia. You see the Nikkei here down 0.5% and looking bearish, and we see the relative performance to the Dow down 10% less good than the Dow over the past year. Looking at the Aussie market, just clicking on the top here, we see here Sierra Resources down 5.7%, Main Pharma down 5%. On the other end of the scale, we've got Pact Group down 3.6%. Might be just recovering though on that medium-term chart, and we've got some upside targets. Remember, you can click on any chart. So if you want to look at the Commonwealth Bank, for example, you get this multiple view. So long-term bearish, medium-term bullish, but got downside targets. We have got a good upside target here, and some recovery targets there as well, and the relative improving. And it's volume driven. We're seeing the volume rising. So you can do that on any stock. Really quite useful to be able to do that. Looking at the Chinese market, we saw a lot of Chinese stocks were down. There were only 4 stocks up, and these are they. So really, and even here, this stock's up, but the trend is just so clearly down, and we've underperformed the Dow by 60%. So Chinese stocks, there's a lot of blood still sitting there. The Hang Seng, we saw only a handful of stocks up. Linked Real Estate was up 1.7% on the downside. Just click on the top of the column. AAC were down 5%. These are the sorts of numbers that are really dragging the index down. Again, really big downtrends. The Indian market was a little bit better. We had more stocks up. Sun Pharmaceuticals, they haven't looked great on the chart though, and again we've got downside targets. You can click on any of these stocks again and just get an overview. Wipro we see is looking pretty good on the chart. We've got a good upside target here. The relative performance is pretty good. Going the other way, of course, we see Vedanta down 3.515% this morning. Tata Steel are lower, so we can do that on any group we want, and we see that as well here with Mahindra and Mahindra Limited. So looking at the Japanese market, we see here more stocks are up. Family Mart up 3%, holding on to its bull trend, so looking a little bit better, but the relative just changing position there. And also China we're seeing down 5%. So we're still seeing some pretty big falls, even though the index was up. Looking across to Europe this morning, we're just an hour into the open in the European market. The FTSE 100, ranking the FTSE 100, see Sainsbury's is up, Ocado, EasyJet up despite them announcing a 15 million hit from the Gatwick closure. Morrison's up. We're seeing mostly supermarkets next and retail next. Kingfisher were hit yesterday, back up today. A lot of these stocks still trending down though. M&S, we're seeing quite a good performance this morning from retailers, even Burberry in there. And again, we've got all the trends and targets. Going the other way, looking at we've got IAG down 1.5%, Barclays. Banks look like they're hit this morning, and resources, oil also being hit. Here we see the live prices coming in from Yahoo Finance. Taking a look at the 250, we've got Dixon's Car Phone Warehouse up 2.8% again, despite their announcement this morning. and we're seeing Equanti up 3%, AA Group up 2.8%. A lot of these stocks still in downtrends, this is really quite key. IG Group down a massive 8%. They've been really hit. So interesting to see that as well. Stock 600. If we look at the Stock 600, we see here we've got Hugo Boss up 4%. Ho Chief up 5%. So we are seeing some performances. That's looking like a turnaround. This is what we'll start watching for: is signs of moves into positive territory. And on the negative side in Europe, IG is leading that list. Greco down 5%. UBS down 4%, really falling away quite heavily on the chart. So we still do have some pretty poor performances. It's really a case of working very hard to find things that are still in uptrends. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.